I'd like to thank you all for coming to listen, and I'd particularly like to thank the people who invited me and made it possible to come, the Neuroscience Institute, Dr. Heron for doing all the organizing, and the Urban Child Institute. And I want to say I think how very fortunate you are in this community to have these resources devoted to the developing brains. You really are very fortunate. I think a lot of people would give their eye teeth to have what you have here. So I'm happy to see it. What I'm going to do is, I'm thinking probably, can you hear me in that back corner over there? Okay. This is probably what you want to know, right? And I'll try and give you some answers, but I think I'm probably going to tell you it's not as simple as it might sound. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to do all of this in 35 minutes. I'm going to tell you about basic nutrition. I'm going to tell you about brain development. But I don't do such a good job. I know that you've got this amazing slideshow out there. I looked at it and I thought, oh dear, what I'm going to show you really looks very dull and boring compared with what you can look at out there. So I'm even going to do mine quite quickly because I know you can get the real story by looking out there. And I'm then going to talk about what is this thing we call intelligence, IQ. How do we measure it? And how might nutrition affect these measures of intelligence? And then having sort of said... what did I do wrong?
Nothing.
I see. So, and then having set the stage by doing that, I'm going to talk to you about this notion of should we be supplementing our diets either by taking pills or by eating functional foods. And I'm going to use as an illustration of that the story of the omega-3 fatty acids and brain development in children, in infants and children. So in 35 minutes, this is what we're going to do. All right. So here's the nutrition. When you think about... I must be doing something wrong.
No. That's it. Right there.
You're okay.
That spot right there. Move back a little bit.
Don't stand over here.
Right, no, right here.
Where should I stand? There. Okay. So when you think about nutrition, you need to get two things from nutrition. Firstly, you need both. You need energy. You need lots of energy. And so we need to take in food so that our bodies can break it down, so we have energy for all these body processes that take energy. And then we need building blocks. And if you think we're sitting here, but we're continually replacing ourselves. And so we need building blocks to replace ourselves. And where are we going to get these building blocks? We need to take in the basic nutrients in the form of building blocks. And then sometimes we use these to build other nutrients. And this way we build ourselves. So the macronutrients are the nutrients we take in large quantities, and we can use them for energy and we use them for building blocks. And mostly you want to take in fats and carbohydrates and use those for energy. And then the proteins are better used for your building blocks. You don't want to be using your protein for energy. So what you want to do is to have a diet that has enough protein, but also enough calories, so that you have enough for building blocks and enough for energy. And some of the fats are also used for building blocks. So those are your macronutrients, large nutrients. Then we have micronutrients, which we take in very, very small amounts. But they're essential because they work to lubricate the works. And if we don't have them there, it's not going to work. If you don't have oil in your engine, it's not going to run. So these are the vitamins, different vitamins. In terms of brain development, what's really important are minerals like iron and zinc, particularly iron, and then trace elements like iodine. In areas of the world where there's not enough iodine, you get mental retardation. And so it's very important that before conception that there's enough iodine in a woman's diet for appropriate brain development. So what do we call essential nutrients are nutrients that we can't make. Nutrients that we have to get from various components of our food because we don't have the metabolic capacity to make them. And there's certain amino acids that we need as building blocks, and we have to get them, and we have to get them in the appropriate combination. And if you don't get them in the appropriate combination, it's hard to use them as building blocks. And this is where people who are vegetarian, particularly when people who are vegetarian are pregnant, they need to be very careful that they eat the appropriate combination of a vegetarian diet, so they will get the right combination of building blocks. If you eat meat or fish, they automatically provide it prepackaged. But if you're vegetarian, you have to watch more carefully. And if you don't have enough protein during gestation, then you certainly are going to have problems with brain development. And there are lots of studies showing that protein-calorie malnutrition, which unfortunately is a big problem both in the developing world as well as in impoverished areas in developed countries like North America, where you will have children who are protein malnourished because they just are generally overall malnourished. And so it's important that we take this into account. Now, so we've done nutrition, right? Now we're going to do brain development. In terms of your brain, think of your brain as a cauliflower. And you've cut the cauliflower down the middle of your face through your nose, this way. This is this cut of the brain. This is your forehead. Oh, there's a pointer. This is your forehead. This is behind over here. Okay, that's this brain. This is the cortex of your brain, the so-called gray matter, where you do a lot of the thinking or a lot of the talking that goes on in your brain happens there. So messages from your messages about both the external world come through the senses. Messages from your eyes, your ears, your nose, your mouth, and then messages from what's happening inside your body come up through the spine. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. Come up through the spinal cord into the brain. They send to the cortex. There's all kinds of conversations that happen in the cortex. There are highways in the brain. Here's a highway from one cortex to the other that sends messages back and forth. And then the brain makes decisions, and then you do something, right? Or you regulate your internal environment if it's not working so well. So this is the adult brain. Now, the most important communicating organ or entity in the brain is what we call the neuron. This is the most important communicating cell. This is like a cell phone. Oh, why do I do that? So what you have here, here's sort of the receiver of the cell phone, and you see it's got lots of branches. The more branches it has, the more messages it can receive, right? And the more branches it has down here, which is where it sends the messages, the more branches it can receive. Now there's lots of evidence that nutrient deficiencies of various types affect how many of these branches you can make. So it's very important that you have lots of these branches. And so, so what you do is you get the message here, you send the message down this part of the neuron that's called the axon, which is fat. It has a very special fatty layer on the outside, so it can send messages very quickly. And that's why we have white matter in the brain, because the white matter is where we send the messages, the gray matter is where the messages sort of talk to each other. And so the cells that process information. And so the other thing that we need to talk about when the neuron sends messages is the way it sends messages. The way it sends messages is these, so this is where this is the message, this is the end of the neuron, right? So think that the end of this neuron is then contacting many other neurons where they receive messages. The way it does that is it sends chemicals across a little gap. There's a little gap, and there's special chemicals that we call neurotransmitters that go across that little gap. And neurotransmitters, they're different neurotransmitters that do different things. But nutrients,